The crystal wine glass shattered against the hardwood floor, sending burgundy liquid splashing across her grandmother's antique tablecloth. Maya's hand trembled as she stared at the scene unfolding before her. The traditional Thanksgiving dinner she had spent weeks planning, now twisted into a nightmare she never saw coming. Her sister Amber was on her knees in front of Derek, Maya's fiancé of 2 years, while he held out a ring that definitely wasn't the one Maya had been wearing just hours before. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself, it was the smug satisfaction on Amber's face as she glanced up at Maya, those familiar green eyes sparkling with malicious triumph. What neither of them knew was that Maya had been keeping a secret of her own, one that would turn this moment of devastating humiliation into the opening move of the most satisfying game of chess she had ever played. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya had always believed that Thanksgiving was supposed to be about gratitude, family, and tradition. She had spent the entire week of November preparing for what she thought would be the perfect holiday dinner, the kind that would create warm memories for years to come. The irony wasn't lost on her now, standing frozen in the doorway of her own dining room, watching her carefully orchestrated world implode in the most spectacular fashion possible. The morning had started innocently enough. Maya had woken up at 5 in the morning to begin the elaborate preparations for hosting both families at her and Derek's shared apartment in downtown Portland. She had been living with Derek for 8 months now, ever since he proposed during a romantic weekend getaway to the Oregon coast. The engagement had felt like the natural progression of their 3-year relationship, the kind of stable, comfortable love that everyone said was the foundation of lasting marriages. Derek worked as a software engineer at one of the tech companies that had transformed Portland into a hub of innovation and opportunity. He was reliable, predictable, and safe. Maya had met him through her job at a marketing firm where she specialized in digital campaigns for local businesses. Their relationship had developed slowly, built on shared interests in hiking, craft beer, and Netflix marathons. Nothing about it had been particularly passionate or earth-shattering, but Maya had convinced herself that passion was overrated anyway. Stability was what mattered in the long run. Her sister Amber had arrived from Los Angeles the night before, sweeping into the apartment with her usual dramatic flair and an armload of designer shopping bags. At 25, Amber was 3 years younger than Maya, but had always carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never questioned her place in the world. She worked as a social media influencer, though Maya had never quite understood how posting carefully curated photos of coffee and yoga poses translated into a sustainable career. Somehow, Amber always seemed to have money for expensive clothes, frequent travel, and the kind of lifestyle that looked effortless but required constant maintenance. The contrast between the sisters had been apparent since childhood. Maya was the responsible one, the academic achiever, the daughter who followed rules and exceeded expectations. Amber was the artistic one, the free spirit, the daughter who charmed her way out of consequences and always seemed to land on her feet no matter how questionable her decisions. Their parents had always treated these differences as complementary, rather than competitive, as if Maya's stability somehow balanced Amber's chaos in a way that made the family complete. Maya had been genuinely excited about Amber's visit. It had been nearly 6 months since they had seen each other in person, and Maya was looking forward to introducing Derek to more of her family. They had met briefly at Maya's birthday party earlier in the year, but that had been a crowded event with dozens of people. This would be different, more intimate, a chance for Derek to see Maya in the context of her family relationships. The guest list for Thanksgiving dinner included Derek's parents, Harold and Susan, who were driving up from Eugenia, Maya's parents, Robert and Linda, who lived across town, and Derek's best friend Connor, who had recently moved to Portland from Chicago and didn't have family nearby. Maya had met Connor several times over the past few months and had found him to be everything Derek wasn't. Where Derek was cautious and methodical, Connor was impulsive and passionate. Where Derek preferred staying home, Connor was always suggesting new adventures. Where Derek was content with routine, Connor seemed to thrive on unpredictability. Maya had noticed the way Connor looked at her, the way conversations between them lasted longer than they should, the way he seemed to find excuses to touch her arm or shoulder when he was making a point. She had also noticed the way her heart rate increased when he was around, the way she found herself thinking about him at random moments throughout the day, the way she had started paying more attention to her appearance when he knew he would be present. These observations had created a low-level anxiety that she had been working hard to suppress. She was engaged to Derek. She was planning a future with Derek. Whatever she thought she felt for Connor was just a temporary distraction, the kind of minor crush that happens sometimes in long-term relationships. Stability was what mattered in the long run. Her sister Amber had arrived from Los Angeles the night before, sweeping into the apartment with her usual dramatic flair and an armload of designer shopping bags. At 25, Amber was 3 years younger than Maya, but had always carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never questioned her place in the world. She worked as a social media influencer, though Maya had never quite understood how posting carefully curated photos of coffee and yoga poses translated into a sustainable career. Somehow, Amber always seemed to have money for expensive clothes, frequent travel, and the kind of lifestyle that looked effortless but required constant maintenance. The contrast between the sisters had been apparent since childhood. Maya was the responsible one, the academic achiever, the daughter who followed rules and exceeded expectations. Amber was the artistic one, the free spirit, the daughter who charmed her way out of consequences and always seemed to land on her feet no matter how questionable her decisions. Their parents had always treated these differences as complementary rather than competitive, as if Maya's stability somehow balanced Amber's chaos in a way that made the family complete. Maya had been genuinely excited about Amber's visit. It had been nearly 6 months since they had seen each other in person, and Maya was looking forward to introducing Derek to more of her family. They had met briefly at Maya's birthday party earlier in the year, but that had been a crowded event with dozens of people. This would be different, more intimate, a chance for Derek to see Maya in the context of her family relationships. The guest list for Thanksgiving dinner included Derek's parents, Harold and Susan, who were driving up from Eugene, Maya's parents, Robert and Linda, who lived across town, and Derek's best friend Connor, who had recently moved to Portland from Chicago and didn't have family nearby. Maya had met Connor several times over the past few months and had found him to be everything Derek wasn't. Where Derek was cautious and methodical, Connor was impulsive and passionate. Where Derek preferred staying home, Connor was always suggesting new adventures. Where Derek was content with routine, Connor seemed to thrive on unpredictability. Maya had noticed the way Connor looked at her, the way conversations between them lasted longer than they should, the way he seemed to find excuses to touch her arm or shoulder when he was making a point. She had also noticed the way her heart rate increased when he was around, the way she found herself thinking about him at random moments throughout the day, the way she had started paying more attention to her appearance when she knew he would be present. These observations had created a low-level anxiety that she had been working hard to suppress. She was engaged to Derek. She was planning a future with Derek. Whatever she thought she felt for Connor was just a temporary distraction, the kind of minor crush that happens sometimes in long-term relationships. The morning of Thanksgiving had been a whirlwind of activity. Maya had risen early to put the turkey in the oven, a 20-pound bird that she had been brining since Tuesday. She had made Derek's favorite stuffing recipe, the one his grandmother had passed down through 3 generations. She had prepared homemade cranberry sauce, green bean casserole, mashed potatoes with roasted garlic, and sweet potato casserole with a pecan streusel topping. For dessert, she had baked an apple pie, a pumpkin pie, and a batch of Derek's favorite chocolate chip cookies. Derek had helped with some of the preparation, but he had spent most of the morning on his laptop, dealing with what he called an urgent work issue that couldn't wait until Monday. Maya had felt a familiar flash of irritation at his ability to prioritize work over their special day, but she had pushed the feeling aside. Derek was ambitious and dedicated to his career. These were qualities she admired, even when they were inconvenient. Amber had emerged from the guest room around 10 in the morning, looking effortlessly beautiful in a way that Maya had always envied. She was wearing a flowing bohemian dress that probably cost more than Maya's monthly grocery budget, and her long auburn hair was arranged in the kind of artfully messy updo that looked casual but probably required an hour of careful styling. She had offered to help with the cooking, but Maya had declined, knowing from experience that Amber's definition of helping usually involved more talking than actual work. Instead, Amber had positioned herself at the kitchen island with a cup of coffee and had entertained Maya with stories from her recent trip to Tulum, where she had done a collaboration with a luxury resort that had paid for her week-long stay in exchange for a series of Instagram posts.
Maya found herself both fascinated and slightly resentful of Amber's lifestyle. There was something appealing about the freedom and spontaneity of it, but also something unsustainable and superficial that made Maya grateful for her own more grounded approach to life. The first guests to arrive were Derek's parents, Harold and Susan, who punctually appeared at the door at exactly 2 o'clock, the time Maya had specified for dinner. Harold was a retired accountant who shared Derek's methodical nature and appreciation for order. Susan was a former elementary school teacher who had a warm, nurturing personality that had immediately put Maya at ease when they first met. They had brought a bottle of wine and a homemade apple crisp, and they greeted Maya with the kind of genuine affection that made her feel like she was already part of the family. Maya's parents arrived 15 minutes later, carrying a bouquet of flowers and their traditional contribution of dinner rolls from the bakery, where Linda had worked as a part-time decorator for the past 10 years. Robert was a retired electrician who had spent his career working.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The dinner itself had been a success by every measurable standard. The turkey was perfectly cooked, moist and flavorful, with a golden brown skin that looked like something from a magazine. The side dishes had all turned out exactly as Maya had hoped, and the conversation around the table had been lively and engaging. Derek's father and Maya's father had discovered a shared interest in vintage cars, while the mothers had bonded over their mutual love of gardening and home improvement shows. Amber had been charming and entertaining, regaling the table with funny stories and asking thoughtful questions about everyone's lives and interests. She had complimented Maya repeatedly on the meal and the beautiful table setting, and she had made everyone laugh with her imitation of a particularly demanding client who had wanted her to reshoot an entire campaign because the sunset wasn't pink enough. Maya had felt a warm sense of satisfaction watching her family and Derek's family mesh so well together. Connor had been quieter than usual during dinner, but Maya had attributed that to the awkwardness of being the only non-family member at such an intimate gathering. She had made sure to include him in conversations and had noticed that he seemed particularly interested when she talked about her work or her plans for the future. There had been a moment when she was serving the pie when their hands had brushed as she handed him his plate, and the brief contact had sent an unexpected jolt of electricity through her entire body. After dinner, the group had moved to the living room, where Derek had built a fire in the fireplace and opened the bottle of bourbon that Connor had brought. The conversation had continued, ranging from politics to travel to family traditions. Maya had felt genuinely happy, surrounded by the people she cared about most, in the home she had created with the man she was planning to marry. The first sign that something was wrong had been subtle. Maya had noticed that Amber and Derek were sitting closer together on the couch than seemed necessary, their conversation becoming more intimate and exclusive even as the larger group continued to talk around them. When Maya had offered to refill drinks, Derek had barely acknowledged her, too focused on whatever Amber was saying to him in a voice just low enough that Maya couldn't make out the words. Maya had tried to dismiss her growing unease as paranoia or jealousy. Amber had always been the kind of person who drew attention wherever she went, and Derek was just being polite to his fiancé's sister. There was nothing unusual about friendly conversation between future in-laws. But as the evening progressed, Maya found herself watching them more closely, noticing the way Amber would touch Derek's arm when she laughed, the way Derek's eyes seemed to light up when Amber spoke, the way they seemed to be creating their own private bubble even in the midst of the family gathering. The breaking point had come when Maya had gone to the kitchen to start clearing the dessert plates. She had been standing at the sink, rinsing dishes and loading them into the dishwasher when she heard voices in the hallway. Derek and Amber were standing just outside the kitchen, speaking in hushed tones that immediately made Maya suspicious. She had frozen, straining to hear what they were saying without making her eavesdropping obvious. "I can't keep pretending," Derek had said, his voice heavy with emotion that Maya had rarely heard from him. "This isn't fair to anyone, especially not to Maya." "I know," Amber had replied, her voice soft and sympathetic. "But we can't help how we feel. Sometimes these things just happen." "She doesn't deserve this," Derek had continued. "She's been nothing but good to me, and I'm about to destroy her life." "We're not destroying anything," Amber had said firmly. "We're being honest about what we both know is true. Maya will understand eventually. She'll want us to be happy." Maya had felt the blood drain from her face as the implications of the conversation sank in.
Derek and Amber were talking about being together, about feelings they couldn't control, about Maya as if she were an obstacle to be managed rather than a person with agency and emotions of her own. The betrayal was stunning, not just because of what it meant, but because of how completely she had failed to see it coming. She had stood there in the kitchen, paralyzed by shock and indecision, listening to the two people she trusted most in the world plan the destruction of her life with the casual efficiency of people deciding what movie to watch. Part of her wanted to confront them immediately, to demand an explanation and force them to face the consequences of their actions. But another part of her, the part that had always been careful and strategic, told her to wait, to gather more information before making any irreversible decisions. The conversation in the hallway had ended abruptly when Connor had appeared, asking if he could help with anything. Derek and Amber had quickly separated, returning to the living room with forced casualness that probably seemed normal to everyone else but felt glaringly obvious to Maya. She had continued washing dishes, her hands moving automatically, while her mind raced through the implications of what she had overheard. By the time she had finished in the kitchen and returned to the living room, the family gathering was beginning to wind down. Derek's parents were making noises about the drive back to Eugene, and Maya's parents were talking about getting home before it got too late. Connor was helping Derek bank the fire in the fireplace, and Amber was scrolling through her phone, probably already planning her next Instagram post about the perfect family Thanksgiving. Maya had gone through the motions of saying goodbye to everyone, accepting hugs and compliments on the meal, promising to share recipes, and making tentative plans for Christmas. She had watched Derek kiss her cheek in front of their families, the gesture feeling like a performance rather than an expression of genuine affection. She had hugged Amber, inhaling her sister's familiar perfume, and wondering how long this betrayal had been developing right under her nose. After the families had left, Connor had lingered, helping Maya and Derek clean up the remaining dishes and put away the leftover food. Maya had found herself studying his face, looking for signs that he knew what was happening between Derek and Amber. But Connor had seemed genuinely oblivious, making jokes about how much food was left and complimenting Maya on her cooking skills. "This was perfect," Connor had said as he prepared to leave. "Thank you for including me. I know family holidays can be awkward when there's an outsider around." "You're not an outsider," Maya had replied automatically, though the words felt more meaningful than she had intended them to be. "You're always welcome here." Connor had smiled at her, one of those warm, genuine smiles that made her stomach flutter in a way that Derek's smiles never had. For a moment, they had just looked at each other, and Maya had felt the same electric connection that had been building between them. Then Derek had appeared with Connor's jacket, and the moment had passed. After Connor left, Maya had expected Derek to bring up whatever was happening with Amber. She had been prepared for a difficult conversation, ready to listen to his explanation and figure out how to move forward. Instead, Derek acted completely normal, talking about how well the dinner had gone and how much he had enjoyed getting to know Amber better. He had thanked Maya for all her hard work and had suggested they watch a movie before bed. Maya had been too shocked and confused to know how to respond. Derek's behavior was so normal, so consistent with their usual evening routine, that she began to doubt what she had overheard in the hallway. Maybe she had misinterpreted the conversation. Maybe Derek and Amber had been talking about something else entirely. Maybe her own growing feelings for Connor had made her paranoid and suspicious about Derek's interactions with other people. They had ended up watching a romantic comedy that Maya couldn't focus on, her mind cycling through different interpretations of the evening's events. Derek had fallen asleep on the couch halfway through the movie, his head on Maya's shoulder, looking peaceful and content in a way that seemed incompatible with someone who was planning to leave his fiancé for her sister.
Maya had sat there for hours, listening to Derek's steady breathing and staring at the engagement ring on her finger, trying to figure out what was real and what was her imagination. The next morning, Derek had left early for a work meeting, kissing Maya goodbye and telling her he loved her with the same casual affection he had shown for the past 8 months. Amber had slept in, emerging from the guest room around noon, looking slightly hungover and asking for coffee. She had spent a day lounging around the apartment, talking about her plans to explore Portland and asking Maya for recommendations about restaurants and shopping. Maya had watched her sister carefully, looking for signs of guilt or deception, but Amber had seemed completely normal. She had been affectionate and chatty, sharing gossip about their mutual friends and asking about Maya's wedding plans. If she was harboring feelings for Derek or planning to steal him away, she was hiding it perfectly. That evening, Derek had suggested that the three of them go out for dinner at a trendy restaurant downtown.
Maya had agreed, partly because she wanted to observe Derek and Amber's interactions in a different setting, and partly because she was tired of second-guessing every conversation and gesture. Maybe a change of scenery would help her figure out what was really going on. The restaurant had been crowded and loud, with exposed brick walls and an open kitchen that created an energetic, bustling atmosphere. They had been seated at a small table near the window, with Maya and Derek on one side and Amber across from them. The conversation had flowed easily, covering everything from Amber's work to Derek's latest project to Maya's plans for expanding her client base at the marketing firm. Maya had noticed that Derek seemed more animated than usual, laughing more readily at Amber's stories and asking detailed questions about her travels and experiences. But she had also noticed that his attention wasn't exclusively focused on Amber. He had been equally engaged when Maya talked about her work, and he had made several references to their upcoming wedding and shared plans for the future. By the end of the evening, Maya had convinced herself that she had been overthinking everything. Derek and Amber were just getting to know each other better, which was natural and healthy for future in-laws. The conversation she had overheard in the hallway must have been about something else, or maybe she had misunderstood the context entirely. She had been feeling guilty about her own attraction to Connor, and that guilt had made her suspicious of Derek's perfectly innocent interactions with her sister. Amber had left the next morning to fly back to Los Angeles, hugging Maya goodbye and thanking her for the wonderful visit. She had promised to return for the wedding, which was planned for the following spring, and had made Maya promise to visit her in California soon. Derek had driven Amber to the airport, returning home with reports that her flight had departed on time and that she had seemed excited about her next work project. Life had returned to normal after Amber's visit. Derek had gone back to his usual work routine, and Maya had thrown herself into planning their spring wedding. They had scheduled meetings with caterers and florists, had toured potential venues, and had started working on their guest list. Derek had seemed engaged and enthusiastic about the planning process, offering opinions about menu options and expressing preferences about music and decorations. Maya had also been seeing more of Connor, who had become a regular fixture in their social circle. He had joined them for dinners, movie nights, and weekend hiking trips. Maya had found herself looking forward to these gatherings more than she wanted to admit, and she had been increasingly aware of the chemistry between herself and Connor. But she had also been careful to maintain appropriate boundaries, never allowing herself to be alone with Connor for extended periods and always including Derek in their conversations and activities. The real revelation had come 3 weeks after Thanksgiving on a rainy December evening when Derek had been working late and Maya had been home alone, catching up on laundry and meal planning for the week. She had been folding Derek's shirts when she had found a piece of paper in his pants pocket, folded small and worn soft from repeated handling. Her first instinct had been to put it aside without reading it, respecting Derek's privacy. But something about the way it had been carefully folded and obviously cherished had made her curious. The note had been in Amber's handwriting, written on hotel stationery from a boutique property in downtown Portland. The message had been brief but devastating in its clarity. "I can't stop thinking about what happened between us. I know this complicates everything, but I've never felt this way before. Call me when you're ready to talk about what this means. I love you." The note had been dated the day after Thanksgiving, which meant that Amber had written it after returning to her hotel that night, after spending the evening with Maya and Derek and their families. Maya had read the note 3 times, each reading making the betrayal more real and more painful. Derek and Amber had been involved romantically, and it had happened while Amber was visiting for Thanksgiving, probably while Maya was sleeping in the next room or busy in the kitchen preparing meals for everyone. The conversation she had overheard in the hallway hadn't been about future possibilities or growing feelings. It had been about something that had already happened, something that had already changed everything. The discovery had been devastating, but it had also been clarifying. Maya had spent weeks questioning her own perceptions and doubting her instincts, but the note had confirmed that her suspicions had been correct. Derek and Amber had betrayed her in the most fundamental way possible, and they had been planning to continue their relationship while pretending that nothing had changed. Maya had spent the rest of the evening in a state of shock, trying to process the full implications of what she had learned. Derek and Amber are in love with each other, or at least they believed they were. Derek was planning to leave her, probably after the holidays, probably in a way that would make him seem like the victim of circumstances beyond his control. Amber was willing to destroy her relationship with her sister for the sake of a man she had known for less than a year. The more Maya had thought about it, the angrier she had become. Not just angry about the betrayal itself, but angry about the way it was being handled. Derek and Amber were treating her like a child who couldn't handle the truth, making decisions about her life without including her in the conversation. They were planning to hurt her in a way that would preserve their own sense of being good people who had simply fallen victim to uncontrollable emotions. That night, Maya had made a decision that would change everything. Instead of confronting Derek and Amber immediately, she would let them continue with their plan while developing a plan of her own. If they wanted to play games with her life and her emotions, she would play games too, but she would play to win. The first step had been to figure out exactly what Derek and Amber were planning. Maya had become a detective in her own life, paying attention to Derek's phone calls and text messages, monitoring his email when possible, and watching for changes in his behavior or routine. She had also started staying in closer touch with Amber, calling her more frequently and asking more questions about her life and her work. Within a week, Maya had confirmed that Derek and Amber were in regular contact. Derek had been making phone calls when he thought Maya was asleep or busy, speaking in low voices, and ending conversations quickly when Maya appeared. Amber had been posting more frequently on social media, including several photos that seemed designed to capture Derek's attention, pictures of herself in lingerie or bikinis with captions about missing someone special. Maya had also discovered that Derek had been researching apartments in Los Angeles, looking at rental properties near Amber's neighborhood. He had been saving money in a separate account that Maya hadn't known about, probably preparing to make a move to California after he ended their engagement. The planning was methodical and deliberate, which somehow made the betrayal even more hurtful than if it had been a spontaneous mistake. But Maya had also been making discoveries about herself during this period of surveillance and investigation. The anger and hurt she felt about Derek and Amber's betrayal had been accompanied by a surprising sense of relief.
The more she thought about her relationship with Derek, the more she realized that she had been settling for something safe and comfortable rather than pursuing something passionate and fulfilling. Derek had never made her feel the way Connor did, had never inspired the kind of excitement and anticipation that she felt whenever Connor was around. This realization had led Maya to examine her feelings for Connor more honestly than she had allowed herself to do before. Connor was everything Derek wasn't, but he was also everything Maya hadn't known she wanted in a partner. He was spontaneous and adventurous, passionate about his work and his hobbies, emotionally expressive in ways that Derek had never been. When Connor looked at her, she felt seen and appreciated in a way that was entirely different from Derek's casual, comfortable affection. Maya had started to wonder what would happen if she pursued her feelings for Connor instead of trying to suppress them. Connor was Derek's best friend, which created obvious complications, but those complications might be less significant if Derek was planning to leave anyway. If Derek and Amber wanted to blow up the existing relationships and arrangements, maybe Maya could do some blowing up of her own. The idea had been both terrifying and exhilarating. Maya had spent her entire adult life being responsible and predictable, making careful decisions based on practical considerations rather than emotional impulses. The possibility of doing something completely different, something that prioritized her own happiness over other people's expectations, had been almost intoxicating. Maya had begun testing the waters with Connor, finding excuses to spend more time with him, and allowing their conversations to become more personal and intimate. She had discovered that Connor was also questioning his current life situation, feeling stuck in a job that didn't challenge him and lonely in a new city where he hadn't yet built a strong social network. He had confided in Maya about his doubts and insecurities in a way that felt more genuine and vulnerable than any conversation she had ever had with Derek. The attraction between Maya and Connor had been building steadily, but Maya had been careful not to act on it while she was still officially engaged to Derek. She had moral boundaries that she wasn't willing to cross, even as Derek and Amber were crossing every boundary that should have mattered to them. But she had also been laying groundwork, creating the foundation for something that could develop once the current situation resolved itself. Maya had known that the resolution would come soon. Derek had been acting increasingly distant and preoccupied, and she had overheard phone conversations that suggested he was planning to have a serious conversation with her soon, probably right after the holidays. Amber had been dropping hints about visiting Portland again, maybe for New Year's Eve or shortly after.
The timeline was becoming clear, and Maya had been preparing herself for the confrontation that was inevitable. What Maya hadn't expected was that Derek and Amber would choose to make their move during Christmas dinner in front of both families in the most public and humiliating way possible. She had thought Derek would at least have the decency to break up with her privately before announcing his relationship with Amber. She had thought Amber would at least pretend to feel guilty about stealing her sister's fiancé. Instead, they had turned her Christmas celebration into their engagement party, using Maya's own home as the stage for their romantic declaration. The cruelty of it was breathtaking, made worse by the fact that Maya's parents and Derek's parents were witnessing the entire spectacle. This wasn't just a private betrayal between three people who would have to figure out how to move forward. This was a public humiliation designed to ensure that Maya could never pretend the betrayal hadn't happened. But as Maya had stood there watching Amber accept Derek's proposal, watching her sister's face glow with triumph and satisfaction, she had felt something unexpected. Instead of devastation or heartbreak, she had felt a kind of cold, calculating anger that was entirely new to her. Derek and Amber thought they were winning this game, but they had no idea that Maya had been playing a different game entirely. Maya had been carrying her own secret for weeks now, a secret that would turn this moment of humiliation into the opening move of a much larger and more satisfying victory. As Derek slipped the ring onto Amber's finger, as their families sat in stunned silence trying to process what was happening, Maya had reached into her purse and pulled out her own surprise. The ring box in Maya's hand was small and elegant, containing a diamond that was larger and more beautiful than the one Derek had just given to Amber. But this ring wasn't from Derek, and it wasn't a consolation prize or a desperate attempt to compete with her sister's happiness. This ring was from Connor, who had proposed to Maya just 2 weeks earlier, and who was probably sitting in his apartment right now, waiting for her to call and tell him that the plan they had developed together was finally being put into action. Maya smiled as she opened the ring box, watching Derek and Amber's expressions change from triumph to confusion to horror as they realized that the tables were about to turn in a way they had never anticipated. Maya had let them think they were in control of the situation, let them believe they were the only ones capable of making strategic decisions about love and loyalty and family relationships. Now, it was time to show them exactly how wrong they had been about everything, starting with how wrong they had been about her. The silence that followed Maya's revelation stretched across the dining room like a heavy fog, thick with tension and disbelief. Derek's face had gone completely white, his mouth opening and closing without producing any sound, while Amber remained frozen on her knees beside him, the engagement ring Derek had just placed on her finger, catching the light from the chandelier above. Maya's parents sat at the far end of the table, their expressions cycling through confusion, shock, and slowly dawning understanding of what their daughter had just revealed. Maya held the ring box steady in her trembling hand, the 3-carat emerald-cut diamond sparkling against the velvet interior. The ring was exquisite, far more beautiful and expensive than anything Derek could have afforded on his software engineer salary. More importantly, it represented something that Derek and Amber's hastily planned betrayal never could: genuine love, careful planning, and the kind of deep emotional connection that couldn't be manufactured or stolen. Connor had proposed to Maya 2 weeks earlier, on a cold December evening when they had finally stopped pretending that their growing attraction was just friendship. The proposal had happened after Derek had left for another one of his mysterious late-night work meetings, which Maya now knew were actually secret phone calls with Amber. Connor had arrived at the apartment ostensibly to return a book he had borrowed, but really because he couldn't stay away from Maya any longer. They had been standing in the kitchen, making coffee and talking about nothing in particular, when Connor had suddenly stopped mid-sentence and looked at Maya with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. "I can't do this anymore," he had said, setting down his coffee mug with deliberate care. "I can't pretend that I don't think about you every minute of every day. I can't pretend that I know you're unhappy with Derek, and I definitely can't pretend that there isn't something incredible happening between us." Maya had wanted to deny it, to protect herself and maintain the careful boundaries she had constructed around her feelings. But looking into Connor's eyes, seeing the vulnerability and hope there, she had found herself unable to lie. "I think about you too," she had whispered, the admission feeling both terrifying and liberating. "But this is complicated.
Derek is your best friend. I'm engaged to him. This could destroy everything." "Everything is already destroyed," Connor had replied, moving closer to her. "Derek doesn't love you the way you deserve to be loved. He takes you for granted. He doesn't see how amazing you are, how intelligent and funny and beautiful. If he did, he wouldn't be having secret conversations with your sister at all hours of the night." Maya had been shocked that Connor knew about Derek and Amber's communications. She had thought she was the only one who had noticed the suspicious phone calls and text messages. "You know about that?" she had asked, her voice barely audible. "I've suspected something for weeks," Connor had admitted. "Derek's been acting strange, distracted."
And the way he talked about Amber after Thanksgiving, it wasn't normal. He kept bringing her up in conversations, asking me questions about relationships and loyalty, and whether I thought it was possible to love two people at the same time. I started putting the pieces together. The revelation that Connor had been aware of Derek's emotional infidelity had changed everything for Maya. It meant that her suspicions weren't paranoia or jealousy. It meant that other people could see what was happening, that the betrayal was real and obvious to anyone who was paying attention. It also meant that Connor understood exactly what kind of situation they were all in, and he was choosing to pursue Maya anyway. "What are you saying?" Maya had asked, though she had already known what Connor's answer would be. "I'm saying that I'm in love with you," Connor had replied, reaching out to touch her face gently. "I'm saying that I think you're in love with me too, even if you're afraid to admit it. I'm saying that Derek is going to leave you for Amber, probably sooner rather than later, and when he does, I want to be the person who helps you pick up the pieces. I want to be more than that. I want to be the person who shows you what real love feels like." Maya had kissed him then, finally giving in to the attraction that had been building between them for months. The kiss had been everything that her kisses with Derek never were: passionate, desperate, full of emotion and promise. When they had finally broken apart, both of them breathing hard, Maya had felt like she was seeing the world clearly for the first time in years. "This is crazy," she had said, though she hadn't moved away from Connor's embrace. "The best things usually are," Connor had replied. "But crazy doesn't mean wrong, and it doesn't mean we shouldn't fight for what we want." They had spent the rest of the evening talking, sharing feelings and fears that had been building for months. Connor had told Maya about his growing dissatisfaction with his job in Chicago, about his decision to move to Portland, partly because he wanted to be closer to her. Maya had told Connor about her doubts regarding Derek, about the way she had been settling for a safe, comfortable relationship instead of pursuing something that truly excited her. "I've been thinking about this for months," Connor had confessed. "I've been watching you and Derek together, and I can see that you're not happy. You're just going through the motions, doing what you think you're supposed to do. But life is too short to spend it with the wrong person." "What if Derek wasn't planning to leave me?" Maya had asked. "What if I'm wrong about him and Amber? What if they're just friends, and I'm destroying my relationship based on suspicion and jealousy?" Connor had pulled out his phone and showed Maya a series of text messages. They were from Derek, sent over the course of several weeks, each one more revealing than the last. The messages talked about feelings Derek couldn't control, about a connection he had never experienced before, about guilt over hurting Maya, and uncertainty about how to handle the situation. The most recent message, sent just that afternoon, had been the most damning. "I can't wait to see her again. I know this is going to hurt Maya, but I can't keep living a lie. Amber makes me feel alive in a way I've never felt before." "He's been confiding in you about this?" Maya had asked, feeling a new wave of betrayal wash over her. "He has," Connor had admitted. "And I've been trying to talk him out of it, trying to remind him of what he has with you. But Derek has made up his mind. He's planning to end your engagement after the holidays. He's already been looking at apartments in Los Angeles." The confirmation of what Maya had suspected had been devastating, but it had also been liberating. She no longer had to question her instincts or wonder if she was being paranoid. Derek was planning to leave her for Amber, and he had been discussing his plans with his best friend while continuing to share a bed with Maya and make wedding plans for their future. "I should confront him," Maya had said. "I should tell him I know what's happening and end this charade." "You could do that," Connor had agreed. "Or you could let him make the first move and see how he handles it." The way Derek ends your relationship will tell you everything you need to know about who he really is. And in the meantime, what? Maya had asked, though she had already known what Connor was suggesting. In the meantime, you could let me show you what it feels like to be with someone who actually appreciates you, Connor had said. Someone who sees your worth and doesn't take you for granted. Someone who wants to build a life with you based on passion and partnership, not just convenience and comfort. That was when Connor had gotten down on one knee in Maya's kitchen, pulling out a ring box that he had apparently been carrying for weeks. "Maya, I know this is unconventional," he had said, his voice shaking with emotion. "I know we're both technically involved with other people right now, but I also know that I love you more than I've ever loved anyone, and I believe you love me too. I don't want to wait for Derek to break your heart to start building something beautiful with you. I want to give you something to look forward to, something that belongs just to us." The proposal had been everything that Derek's proposal had never been: spontaneous, passionate, and deeply personal. Connor had talked about the specific things he loved about Maya, about the future he envisioned for them, about the adventures they would have together, and the life they would build together. He had made promises about partnership and equality, about supporting Maya's career ambitions and sharing domestic responsibilities. He had painted a picture of a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine affection, not just shared convenience and social expectations. Maya had said yes without hesitation, slipping the ring onto her finger and feeling a sense of rightness that she had never experienced with Derek.
The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been made specifically for her hand. Connor had explained later that he had spent weeks researching her style preferences, consulting with jewelry experts, and saving money to buy something that would reflect both his love for her and his understanding of who she was as a person. They had spent the following 2 weeks planning their strategy. Connor would continue to maintain his friendship with Derek, gathering information about Derek and Amber's plans while avoiding any behavior that might arouse suspicion. Maya would continue to act as if she knew nothing about Derek's intentions, allowing him to carry out his plan to end their engagement in whatever way he had decided. They would wait for Derek to make his move, and then they would make theirs. The waiting had been both exciting and torturous. Maya had found herself constantly aware of the engagement ring hidden in her jewelry box, a tangible reminder that her future was going to be completely different from what everyone expected. She had also found herself seeing Derek with new clarity, noticing things about their relationship that she had been unconsciously ignoring for months. Derek had indeed been distracted and distant, but Maya had realized that this wasn't a new development related to Amber. Derek had been emotionally absent for most of their relationship, treating Maya more like a convenient roommate than a romantic partner. He had never been particularly interested in her thoughts or feelings, never asked meaningful questions about her work or her dreams, never seemed to see her as a complete person separate from her role in his life. The contrast with Connor had been stark. Connor wanted to know everything about Maya: her childhood memories, her professional goals, her political opinions, her favorite books and movies and foods. He asked follow-up questions and remembered details from previous conversations. He made Maya feel like she was fascinating and complex and worthy of attention and curiosity. Maya had also begun to understand that her relationship with Derek had been based more on external validation than genuine compatibility. They had looked good together on paper: similar ages, similar educational backgrounds, similar career trajectories, similar social circles. Their families approved of the match, their friends thought they were well-suited, and their relationship had progressed according to a predictable timeline that met everyone's expectations. But underneath the surface compatibility, Maya and Derek had very little in common. They had different communication styles, different approaches to conflict resolution, different ideas about how to spend their free time. Derek preferred routine and predictability, while Maya was beginning to realize that she craved adventure and spontaneity. Derek was content with surface-level conversations, while Maya wanted to explore ideas and emotions in depth. With Connor, Maya felt like she was discovering parts of herself that had been dormant during her relationship with Derek. Connor encouraged her to express opinions that Derek had always dismissed as impractical or unrealistic.
Connor was interested in Maya's creative side, asking about her abandoned writing projects and encouraging her to pick up hobbies that Derek had never supported. Connor made Maya feel like she was becoming more herself, not less. The sexual chemistry between Maya and Connor had also been a revelation. During their 2 weeks of secret engagement, they had been careful to maintain physical boundaries, out of respect for the complicated situation. But the tension and anticipation had been electric, creating an intensity that Maya had never experienced with Derek. Every accidental touch, every meaningful glance, every moment of closeness had been charged with possibility and promise. Maya had begun to understand that she had been settling for a relationship that was adequate rather than extraordinary. Derek was a good man in many ways, reliable, responsible, financially stable, socially acceptable. But good enough had stopped being enough once Maya had experienced what it felt like to be truly seen and appreciated by someone who understood her on a deeper level. The decision to wait for Derek to make the first move was strategic as well as emotional. Maya and Connor had agreed that it would be important for Derek to reveal his true character. If Derek was planning to leave Maya for Amber, the way he handled the breakup would demonstrate his integrity and consideration for Maya's feelings. If he chose to be honest and direct, ending their engagement privately before pursuing Amber, it would show that he had some respect for Maya and their shared history. If he chose to be deceptive or cruel, it would validate Maya's decision to move on. Maya had been prepared for Derek to end their engagement privately, probably with a carefully rehearsed speech about growing apart and wanting different things. She had been prepared for him to present the breakup as a mutual decision or a natural evolution rather than acknowledging his feelings for Amber. She had even been prepared for him to be cowardly about it, perhaps leaving her a letter or asking Connor to help facilitate the conversation. What Maya had not been prepared for was the scene that was currently unfolding in her dining room. Derek had not only chosen to propose to Amber in Maya's presence, but he had done it during a family dinner, in front of both sets of parents, using Maya's carefully planned Christmas celebration as the backdrop for his betrayal. The cruelty and thoughtlessness of it was breathtaking, revealing a side of Derek that Maya had never seen before. But the shock and humiliation of Derek's public proposal had also created the perfect opportunity for Maya to reveal her own secret. Instead of being the victim of Derek and Amber's betrayal, Maya was about to become the protagonist of her own love story. Instead of being pitied and consoled, she was about to be celebrated and congratulated. Instead of losing everything, she was about to gain everything she had ever really wanted. Maya looked around the table at the faces of her family members, all of whom were still trying to process what was happening. Her father's expression was moving from confusion to anger as he began to understand that Derek had just humiliated his daughter in front of everyone. Her mother looked like she was about to cry, probably imagining the social embarrassment and family drama that would result from this public betrayal. Derek's parents looked mortified, clearly understanding that their son had just behaved in a way that violated every standard of decency and respect they had tried to teach them. Harold was staring at Derek with disappointment and disbelief, while Susan was looking at Maya with sympathy and concern, probably wondering how they could possibly apologize for their son's behavior. "Maya," Derek finally managed to speak, his voice hoarse with shock. "What are you doing? Where did that ring come from?" Maya smiled, feeling calmer and more confident than she had in months. "This ring came from someone who actually loves me," she said clearly, making sure everyone at the table could hear her. "Someone who sees my worth and doesn't take me for granted. Someone who proposed to me because he wanted to spend his life with me, not because he felt guilty about betraying me." Amber finally stood up from her kneeling position, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. "You're engaged to Derek. You've been planning your wedding for months." "I was engaged to Derek," Maya corrected, "but I've known about your affair for weeks. I've been waiting to see how Derek would handle the situation, hoping he would have the decency to end our engagement privately before pursuing you. Instead, he chose to humiliate me in front of our families, which tells me everything I need to know about his character." Derek's mouth was opening and closing like a fish out of water. "How did you—" "We'd never. There's no affair," he stammered, still trying to deny what everyone in the room now understood to be true. Maya reached into her purse and pulled out the note she had found in Derek's pocket weeks earlier, the one Amber had written on hotel stationery after their Thanksgiving encounter. She placed it on the table where everyone could see it, though she didn't read it aloud, out of consideration for the families who were already dealing with enough shock and embarrassment. "Would you like to explain this to everyone?" Maya asked Derek, her voice steady despite the emotional chaos of the moment. "Or would you prefer that Amber explain what she meant when she wrote about what happened between us and how she'd never felt this way before?" Amber lunged for the note, but Maya was faster, snatching it back before her sister could destroy the evidence. "That's private," Amber hissed, her carefully constructed persona finally cracking to reveal the manipulative person underneath. "Nothing is private when it involves breaking up someone else's engagement," Maya replied. "You both made the decision to involve me in your relationship drama when you chose to have an affair instead of being honest about your feelings. You both made the decision to involve our families when you chose to stage this proposal at my Christmas dinner." Harold cleared his throat, looking older than Maya had ever seen him. "Derek," he said quietly, "is this true? Have you been having an affair with Maya's sister?" Derek looked at his father, then at Maya, then at Amber, seeming to realize that denial was no longer possible. "It's complicated," he said weakly. "We didn't plan for this to happen. Sometimes feelings develop that you can't control." "Feelings that you can control," Maya's father interjected, his voice hard with anger. "Actions that you can control. You could have ended your engagement to Maya before pursuing someone else. You could have had the conversation privately instead of humiliating her in front of everyone who cares about her." Susan was dabbing at her eyes with her napkin, clearly devastated by her son's behavior. "Oh, Maya," she said softly, "I'm so sorry. This is not how we raised Derek. This is not the kind of man we thought he was." "It's not your fault," Maya assured her, feeling genuine sympathy for Derek's parents, who were clearly as shocked by his behavior as everyone else. "Derek is an adult who made his own choices. You have nothing to apologize for." Maya's mother finally found her voice. "Amber," she said, her tone sharp with disappointment, "how could you do this to your sister? How could you destroy your family for a man you barely know?" Amber's face hardened, revealing the selfishness that had always been at the core of her personality. "I didn't destroy anything," she said defensively. "Maya and Derek were never right for each other. Everyone could see that. I just helped Derek realize what he really wanted." "By having an affair with your sister's fiancé," Connor's voice came from the doorway, causing everyone to turn in surprise. Maya's heart leaped as she saw him standing there, looking handsome and confident in his dark wool coat, snowflakes still melting in his hair from the winter storm outside. "Connor," Derek said, his voice filled with confusion and something that might have been betrayal. "What are you doing here? How did you?" "Maya called me," Connor said simply, moving into the room and taking off his coat. "She thought I should be here for this conversation, considering that it involves me too." Maya felt a surge of love and gratitude as Connor moved to stand beside her chair. They had planned this moment, but seeing it actually happen, seeing Connor choose to support her publicly, despite the complications it would create with Derek, was more powerful than she had anticipated. "Involves you how?" Derek asked, though Maya could see the understanding beginning to dawn in his eyes as he noticed the way Connor was looking at her, the way he had positioned himself protectively at her side. Connor reached out and took Maya's hand, the hand wearing his engagement ring, lifting it so that everyone at the table could see the beautiful diamond sparkling in the candlelight. "Maya and I are engaged," he announced, his voice clear and proud. "She said yes 2 weeks ago, when she realized that you were planning to leave her for Amber." The silence that followed Connor's announcement was even deeper than the one that had greeted Maya's revelation. Derek stared at their joined hands as if he couldn't quite process what he was seeing. Amber's face had gone pale, her own engagement ring suddenly looking tawdry and insignificant compared to the stunning piece of jewelry that Connor had chosen for Maya. 2 weeks ago?" Derek repeated, his voice hollow.
But we were still... How could you?
How could I what? Maya asked, standing up so that she was facing Derek directly. How could I accept a proposal from a man who actually loves me after I discovered that my fiancé was having an affair with my sister? How could I choose to be with someone who treats me with respect and consideration instead of staying with someone who lies to me and betrays me? You were cheating on me, Derek accused, finally finding his anger. While I was trying to figure out how to handle this situation with Amber, you were having an affair with my best friend. Connor stepped forward, his jaw tight with controlled fury. Maya never cheated on you, he said firmly. She never even kissed me until after she found evidence of your affair with Amber. Unlike you, Maya has integrity. She doesn't sneak around behind people's backs or lie to the people who trust her. But you've been planning this, Derek continued, his voice rising. You've been plotting against me, manipulating the situation to steal my girlfriend. Maya laughed, a sound with no humor in it. I wasn't your girlfriend, Derek. I was your fiancé. And Connor didn't steal me. You threw me away when you decided that Amber was more important than our relationship. Connor just had the wisdom to recognize my worth when you didn't. Amber finally spoke up, her voice shrill with indignation. This is unbelievable. You're acting like you're the victim here, but you've been carrying on with Derek's best friend behind everyone's back. You're just as guilty as anyone. Am I? Maya asked, turning to face her sister. Let's examine the timeline, shall we? You and Derek had your affair during Thanksgiving weekend, while you were staying in my home as my guest. I found evidence of your relationship 3 weeks later. Connor proposed to me 2 weeks after that, and only after I had confirmed that Derek was planning to leave me for you. At what point in that timeline was I unfaithful to anyone? Maya's mother was looking back and forth between her daughters, clearly trying to understand how the family dinner had turned into such a disaster. Girls, she said weakly, surely we can work this out. Family is more important than any man. You're right, Maya agreed. Family is important. That's why it's so devastating that Amber chose to destroy our relationship for the sake of a man she barely knows. That's why it's so disappointing that she would betray me in such a fundamental way. I didn't betray anyone, Amber protested. Derek and I fell in love. It happens. People can't help who they fall in love with. People can help how they act on those feelings, Connor said firmly. They can help whether they choose to pursue someone who's already in a committed relationship. They can help whether they conduct themselves with honesty and integrity or whether they sneak around and lie. Derek was staring at Connor with a mixture of hurt and disbelief. I trusted you, he said. I confided in you about my feelings for Amber. I asked for your advice. And you used that information to steal Maya away from me? You confided in me because you wanted someone to validate your decision to break Maya's heart, Connor replied. You wanted me to tell you that it was okay to abandon the woman who had been nothing but good to you. I tried to talk you out of it. I tried to remind you of what you had with Maya. But you had already made up your mind. So you decided to make up years, Derek shot back. You decided to take advantage of Maya while she was vulnerable. Maya had heard enough. Stop talking about me like I'm not here, she said sharply. Stop talking about me like I'm a possession that can be stolen or manipulated. I made my own choice, Derek. When I realized that you didn't value our relationship enough to be faithful to it, I chose to be with someone who does value me. When I realized that you were planning to humiliate me and discard me, I chose to be with someone who wants to build a life with me. She turned to look at each person around the table, making sure they all understood what she was saying. Connor didn't steal me from Derek. Derek forfeited any claim to me when he decided to have an affair with my sister. Connor didn't manipulate me or take advantage of me. Connor offered me the kind of love and partnership that I deserve, the kind that Derek was never capable of providing. Maya picked up her engagement ring from Derek, the ring that now felt foreign and meaningless on her finger, and placed it on the table in front of him. I'm returning this, she said formally. Our engagement is over. You're free to pursue Amber without having to worry about my feelings or our family's expectations." Derek stared at the ring, as if he couldn't quite believe what was happening.
"Maya, wait," he said desperately. "We can work this out. What happened with Amber was a mistake. It doesn't mean I don't love you." "Yes, it does," Maya replied gently. "It means exactly that. If you loved me, you wouldn't have been able to betray me the way you did. If you loved me, you would have ended our engagement before pursuing someone else. If you loved me, you would never have chosen to humiliate me in front of our families." She looked at Amber, who was still clutching Derek's ring and looking like she was about to be sick. "And if you loved me as a sister, you never would have pursued my fiancé in the first place. You would have respected my relationship and found someone who was actually available." "Maya," Amber tried again, but Maya held up her hand to stop her. "I don't want to hear your excuses or your justifications," Maya said firmly. "You made your choice when you decided that what you wanted was more important than your sister's happiness. Now you have to live with the consequences of that choice." Connor squeezed Maya's hand, offering silent support and encouragement. Maya felt a surge of gratitude for his presence, for the way he had stood by her during this confrontation, for the strength and confidence his love had given her. "I think it's time for everyone to leave," Maya announced, looking around the table at the shocked faces of her family members. "Derek, you can pack your things tonight and stay somewhere else until you find a permanent living situation. Amber, I assume you'll be extending your stay in Portland to be with Derek, but you won't be staying here." Harold and Susan stood up slowly, looking deeply embarrassed and apologetic. "Maya," Harold said quietly, "we want you to know that we don't condone Derek's behavior. This is not the kind of man we raised him to be, and we're deeply sorry for the pain he's caused you." "Thank you," Maya replied sincerely. "I appreciate that, and I hope we can maintain a relationship despite everything that's happened. You've always been kind to me, and I don't want Derek's actions to affect that." Susan hugged Maya tightly, tears in her eyes. "You deserve so much better than this," she whispered. "I hope you'll be very happy with Connor. He seems like a wonderful young man." Maya's parents were more conflicted, clearly struggling with loyalty to both of their daughters. "Maya," her father said hesitantly, "are you sure about this? Are you sure you're not making decisions based on hurt and anger rather than clear thinking?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Maya replied. "Connor and I love each other, and we want to build a life together. Derek and Amber can do whatever they want, but they're going to do it without destroying my happiness in the process." As the families began to gather their coats and prepare to leave, Maya felt a sense of relief and freedom that she hadn't experienced in months. The confrontation had been painful and embarrassing, but it had also been liberating. She no longer had to pretend that her relationship with Derek was satisfying. She no longer had to suppress her feelings for Connor. She no longer had to worry about what other people expected her to do or how her decisions would affect other people's comfort. Connor helped her clear the table while Derek packed his belongings in their bedroom. Neither of them spoke much, but the silence was comfortable rather than tense. Maya found herself looking forward to the conversation they would have once everyone was gone, the chance to process what had just happened and plan their future together. When Derek emerged from the bedroom with 2 suitcases and a box of personal items, he looked like a man who had aged several years in the course of a single evening. "Maya," he said quietly, "I want you to know that I never meant for things to happen this way. I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did hurt me," Maya replied simply, "and you did mean for it to happen, because you made choices that you knew would hurt me. You just hoped you could control how and when that hurt happened." Derek nodded slowly, seeming to finally understand the full scope of what he had done. "For what it's worth, I think Connor is a good man. I think he'll make you happy in ways that I obviously couldn't." "He already has," Maya said softly. "Goodbye, Derek. I hope you and Amber find what you're looking for." After Derek and Amber left, driving away together into the snowy night, Maya and Connor sat on the couch in front of the fireplace, finally alone together as an officially engaged couple. Maya felt exhausted but also exhilarated, drained by the emotional confrontation but energized by the possibilities that lay ahead.
"How do you feel?" Connor asked, pulling Maya closer to him and stroking her hair gently. "Like I'm finally free," Maya replied honestly. "Like I'm finally with the person I'm supposed to be with. Like my real life is just beginning." Connor kissed the top of her head, his arms tightening around her. "I love you," he said simply. "I love your strength and your integrity and your courage. I love the way you handled yourself tonight. I love the way you stood up for yourself and demanded the respect you deserve." Maya tilted her head to look at him, seeing her own happiness reflected in his eyes. "I love you too," she said, "and I can't wait to see what our life together looks like." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in a blanket of white that made everything look clean and new. Inside, Maya and Connor held each other and planned their future, building something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal and deception. The Christmas dinner that was supposed to celebrate family and tradition had ended up being something entirely different. The beginning of Maya's new life, with the man who truly loved her, free from the people who had taken her for granted for far too long. 3 months had passed since the Christmas dinner that changed everything, and Maya found herself standing in the same downtown Portland apartment, but now it felt completely different. The space that had once felt like a compromise between two people with different tastes now reflected her own personality entirely. Gone were Derek's minimalist decorations and sterile furniture, replaced with warm colors, interesting art, and plants that actually thrived under Maya's care. The apartment had transformed from a place where she had been slowly suffocating into a sanctuary where she could breathe freely. Connor had officially moved in 6 weeks earlier, though he had been spending most nights there since Derek's departure. The transition had been surprisingly smooth, partly because Connor was so much easier to live with than Derek had ever been. Where Derek had been rigid about schedules and routines, Connor was flexible and spontaneous. Where Derek had been particular about cleanliness to the point of obsession, Connor was relaxed about minor messes while still being responsible about major ones. Where Derek had treated shared domestic tasks as favors he was doing for Maya, Connor approached them as natural responsibilities that came with sharing a life together. Maya was in the kitchen preparing dinner for Connor's parents, who were visiting from Chicago for the first time since the engagement announcement. Unlike the formal, anxiety-inducing preparations she had made for Derek's family dinners, this felt natural and enjoyable. Connor's parents, James and Patricia, had been nothing but warm and welcoming since Connor had called to tell them about the engagement. They had expressed no judgment about the circumstances that led to Maya and Connor's relationship, focusing instead on their son's obvious happiness and their excitement about gaining a daughter-in-law. The contrast with her own family's reaction had been stark and painful. Maya's parents had initially been supportive, understanding that Derek's behavior had been inexcusable and that Maya deserved better treatment. But as the weeks passed and the reality of Amber's situation became clear, their support had begun to waver. Amber had stayed in Portland, moving in with Derek in a cramped studio apartment that was all he could afford after losing his share of the lease on the place he had shared with Maya. The relationship that had seemed so passionate and inevitable during its secretive phase had quickly revealed itself to be built on unstable ground. Derek's job performance had suffered dramatically after the confrontation, his focus and productivity declining as he dealt with the personal and professional consequences of his actions. His coworkers had quickly learned about the circumstances of his broken engagement, and his reputation had taken a significant hit. The tech industry in Portland was smaller and more interconnected than people realized, and Derek's behavior had become a cautionary tale that followed him from meeting to meeting. Amber's influencer career had also taken a devastating blow when several followers had pieced together the story from her social media posts and begun sharing their own versions of events. The narrative of a woman who had stolen her sister's fiancé during a family dinner had spread rapidly through various online communities, turning Amber from an aspirational figure into a cautionary example of selfish behavior. Sponsorship deals had been canceled, collaboration offers had dried up, and her carefully curated online persona had been permanently damaged. The financial pressure had created stress in Derek and Amber's relationship almost immediately. Without Maya's steady income and responsible financial management, Derek had struggled to maintain the lifestyle he had grown accustomed to. Amber had been forced to take a part-time job at a retail store, a dramatic come-down from her previous life of sponsored travel and luxury experiences. The romantic fantasy that had driven their affair had crashed into the reality of shared bills, cramped living quarters, and limited resources. Maya had learned about their struggles through mutual friends and social media, though she had blocked both Derek and Amber on all platforms within days of the confrontation. The information came to her secondhand through people who felt she deserved to know how the story was unfolding. Maya found herself feeling neither satisfaction nor sympathy about their difficulties. Their relationship and its consequences had simply become irrelevant to her life. What had surprised Maya was how little she actually missed Derek once the initial adjustment period was over. She had expected to feel some sadness about the end of their 3-year relationship, some nostalgia for the good times they had shared, some regret about the future they had planned together. Instead, she felt primarily relief and gratitude that she had discovered Derek's true character before marrying him rather than after. Living with Connor had shown Maya what a truly compatible partnership looked like. Connor was interested in her thoughts and opinions about everything from current events to what to have for dinner. He actively supported her career goals, encouraging her to take on more challenging projects at work and offering to help with research and brainstorming when she needed it. He shared domestic responsibilities without being asked and without treating his contributions as special favors worthy of praise. More importantly, Connor made Maya feel valued and appreciated in ways that Derek never had. Connor noticed when Maya got a new haircut or wore a dress he particularly liked. He remembered details about her work projects and asked follow-up questions about meetings and deadlines. He brought her coffee in bed on weekend mornings and left little notes in her lunch when he knew she had particularly stressful days ahead. The physical chemistry between Maya and Connor had also been a revelation. What had started as stolen glances and accidental touches during their friendship had developed into a passionate and intimate relationship that made Maya understand what people meant when they talked about being unable to keep their hands off each other. Every aspect of their physical relationship felt natural and exciting in ways that her relationship with Derek never had. Maya had also discovered that Connor shared her sense of adventure and spontaneity in ways that Derek had actively discouraged. Connor was always suggesting new restaurants to try, new hiking trails to explore, new cities to visit for weekend getaways. He had introduced Maya to rock climbing, which had become a shared passion that they pursued together every weekend. He had encouraged her to take up photography again, a hobby she had abandoned during her relationship with Derek because he had considered it a waste of time and money. The wedding planning process with Connor was entirely different from the stressful, complicated negotiations she had endured with Derek. Connor had strong opinions about some things, like wanting to include his college friends and ensuring that the music would be suitable for dancing, but he was flexible about most details. More importantly, he approached the planning as a collaborative project rather than a series of decisions that Maya was expected to handle on her own. They had decided on a small ceremony in the Columbia River Gorge, followed by a reception at a rustic lodge that specialized in intimate gatherings. The guest list would be limited to close family and friends, people who genuinely supported the relationship and wanted to celebrate their future together. Maya's parents had agreed to attend, though their enthusiasm was tempered by their ongoing relationship with Amber. Connor's parents and siblings were thrilled to be included and had already begun planning their travel from Chicago. The question of whether to invite Derek and Amber to the wedding had never seriously been considered. Maya felt no obligation to include people who had betrayed her, and Connor had no interest in maintaining a friendship with someone who had shown such poor judgment and character. They had decided that their wedding would be a celebration of their love and their future, not an opportunity for drama or uncomfortable confrontations. Maya's professional life had also flourished since the end of her engagement to Derek. Without the emotional drain of managing an unsatisfying relationship, she had been able to focus more energy and creativity on her work. She had taken on several high-profile clients and had been promoted to senior account manager, a position that came with increased responsibility and a significant salary increase. The promotion had also given Maya the financial independence to make decisions about her living situation without worrying about Derek's contributions to rent and utilities. She had been able to afford the apartment on her own if necessary, though Connor's presence made the financial picture even more comfortable. More importantly, she had been able to contribute equally to their shared expenses, creating the kind of balanced partnership that had never existed in her relationship with Derek. Connor had also been thriving professionally since their relationship became official.
His job in Portland had always been somewhat unsatisfying, a stepping stone position that he had taken primarily to be closer to Maya. But the confidence and happiness that came with their relationship motivated him to pursue opportunities that better matched his skills and interests. He had suggested new restaurants to try, new hiking trails to explore, new cities to visit for weekend getaways. He had introduced Maya to rock climbing, which had become a shared passion that they pursued together every weekend. He had encouraged her to take up photography again, a hobby she had abandoned during her relationship with Derek because he had considered it a waste of time and money. The wedding planning process with Connor was entirely different from the stressful, complicated negotiations she had endured with Derek. Connor had strong opinions about some things, like wanting to include his college friends and ensuring that the music would be suitable for dancing, but he was flexible about most details. More importantly, he approached the planning as a collaborative project rather than a series of decisions that Maya was expected to handle on her own. They had decided on a small ceremony in the Columbia River Gorge, followed by a reception at a rustic lodge that specialized in intimate gatherings. The guest list would be limited to close family and friends, people who genuinely supported their relationship and wanted to celebrate their future together. Maya's parents had agreed to attend, though their enthusiasm was tempered by their ongoing relationship with Amber. Connor's parents and siblings were thrilled to be included and had already begun planning their travel from Chicago. The question of whether to invite Derek and Amber to the wedding had never seriously been considered. Maya felt no obligation to include people who had betrayed her, and Connor had no interest in maintaining a friendship with someone who had shown such poor judgment and character. They had decided that their wedding would be a celebration of their love and their future, not an opportunity for drama or
He had recently accepted a position with a startup company that was developing sustainable energy solutions, work that aligned with her environmental values and offered significantly more creative freedom than her previous role. The changes in both of their professional lives had created a positive feedback loop in their relationship. Success at work made them both more confident and satisfied, which in turn made them better partners to each other. They celebrated each other's achievements genuinely and supported each other through challenges without competition or resentment. Maya's relationship with her parents had been more complicated to navigate. Her father had eventually come around to supporting her relationship with Connor, recognizing that his daughter was happier and more fulfilled than she had been in years. Her mother had been more resistant, partly because she felt guilty about her ongoing relationship with Amber, and partly because she worried about the social implications of Maya's dramatic romantic upheaval. The tension had come to a head 6 weeks earlier when Maya's mother had called to inform her that Amber was pregnant. The news had been delivered with a mixture of excitement and apprehension, as if Maya's mother wasn't sure how her older daughter would react to becoming an aunt under such circumstances. Maya's response had surprised everyone, including herself. Instead of feeling angry or upset, she had felt genuinely sorry for Amber. A baby conceived in the chaotic early months of a relationship built on betrayal and deception was unlikely to provide the stability and security that a child deserved. Derek's character flaws, which had been manageable in the context of an adult relationship, would be much more serious when it came to raising a child. Amber's immaturity and self-centeredness, which had been merely annoying when directed at adults, would be potentially damaging when directed at a dependent child. "I hope they figure out how to be good parents," Maya had told her mother honestly. "I hope they can build a stable life for their child, even if they couldn't build a stable relationship for themselves." Maya's mother had been surprised by the grace and maturity of her response. She had expected anger, resentment, or at least some expression of satisfaction about Amber's challenging circumstances. Instead, Maya had demonstrated the kind of emotional growth and wisdom that had impressed even her most skeptical family members. The pregnancy had also clarified Maya's feelings about her relationship with Amber. Any remaining hurt or anger she felt about her sister's betrayal was overshadowed by concern for the innocent child who would be born into such a complicated situation. Maya didn't want a relationship with Amber or Derek, but she also didn't want to be the kind of person who punished a child for their parents' mistakes. Maya had told her mother that she would be willing to have a relationship with her niece or nephew, but only if certain boundaries were respected. She would not attend family gatherings where Derek and Amber were present. She would not discuss her relationship with Connor or her wedding plans with Amber. She would not provide financial or emotional support to Derek and Amber, but she would be available to the child if needed as they grew older. These boundaries had been difficult for Maya's mother to accept initially, but she had eventually recognized that they were reasonable and necessary. Maya had been betrayed by two people she trusted, and she had every right to protect herself from further harm. The fact that she was willing to maintain any relationship with Amber's child was actually quite generous given the circumstances. Connor had been completely supportive of Maya's decision regarding her future niece or nephew. He understood that family relationships were complicated and that Maya needed to make choices that prioritized her own emotional well-being. He had also suggested that they might want to start a college fund for the child, not as a gift to Derek and Amber, but as an investment in an innocent person's future opportunities. The suggestion had been typical of Connor's thoughtful and generous nature. He consistently looked for ways to help people without expecting recognition or gratitude in return. He had donated anonymously to several charities that support children in difficult family situations, and he had volunteered to mentor young people who were interested in his field of environmental engineering. Maya had fallen in love with Connor's character as much as his personality. He was the kind of person who returned lost wallets with all the cash still inside, who tipped service workers generously even when the service was mediocre, who stopped to help strangers with flat tires or broken-down cars. He treated Maya with the same consideration and respect that he showed to everyone in his life, which made her feel confident that his love for her was genuine and lasting. The wedding was now just 6 weeks away, and Maya found herself looking forward to it with pure excitement rather than the anxiety and ambivalence she had felt about her previous wedding plans. Every detail of the ceremony and reception reflected her and Connor's shared values and preferences. The flowers would be locally sourced and seasonal. The food would be prepared by a chef who specialized in sustainable and organic ingredients. The music would be provided by a friend of Connor's who played acoustic guitar and sang folk songs. Maya's wedding dress was also completely different from the elaborate gown she had chosen for her wedding to Derek. Instead of a traditional white dress with a long train and intricate beadwork, she had chosen a simple, elegant dress in a soft cream color that could be worn again for other special occasions. The dress reflected her practical nature while still being beautiful and appropriate for the ceremony. Connor had been equally thoughtful about his wedding attire, choosing a suit that could be worn for other formal occasions rather than a traditional tuxedo that would only be appropriate for weddings. They had decided that their wedding should represent their values and their approach to life, practical, sustainable, and focused on substance rather than superficial appearances. The guest list for the wedding had naturally evolved to include only people who genuinely supported their relationship and wanted to celebrate their future together. Several of Maya's friends who had been somewhat skeptical about her rapid transition from Derek to Connor had come around once they saw how happy and fulfilled she had become. Connor's friends from Chicago had already planned a group trip to Portland for the wedding, turning it into a reunion as well as a celebration. Maya's colleagues from work had also been invited, including her boss, who had become a mentor and friend over the past several months. The promotion to senior account manager had come with the opportunity to work more closely with the firm's leadership, and Maya had discovered that she had a talent for strategic thinking and client relationship management that had been underutilized in her previous role. The success at work had also given Maya confidence to pursue some of her more ambitious professional goals. She had been accepted into a part-time MBA program that would allow her to continue working while developing additional business skills. Connor had been enthusiastic about her decision to pursue further education, offering to help with household responsibilities and expenses during the 2 years it would take to complete the degree. The support and encouragement Maya received from Connor was such a contrast to Derek's attitude toward her professional ambitions. Derek often made comments about Maya's work that revealed his belief that her career was less important than his own. He had been dismissive of her ideas about expanding her role or pursuing additional education, always finding practical reasons why her ambitions were unrealistic or unnecessary. Connor, on the other hand, was genuinely interested in Maya's work and excited about her potential for advancement. He asked thoughtful questions about her projects and clients, offered to help with presentations and proposals when appropriate, and celebrated her successes as enthusiastically as she celebrated his own.
The difference in their approaches to Maya's career was one of many revelations about what a truly supportive partnership could look like. Connor wanted Maya to be the best version of herself, while Derek had wanted Maya to be a version of herself that was convenient and comfortable for him. Maya had also been surprised by how much more creative and energetic she felt in her relationship with Connor. The photography hobby that she had abandoned during her relationship with Derek had become a serious pursuit again, and she had even sold several pieces to local galleries and cafes. Connor had encouraged her to display her work prominently in their apartment and helped her set up a small home studio in the spare bedroom. The creative outlet had been therapeutic as well as fulfilling, giving Maya a way to process her emotions about the dramatic changes in her life. Some of her most powerful photographs had been taken during hikes in the Columbia River Gorge, capturing the natural beauty that would serve as the backdrop for her wedding ceremony. Maya had also started writing again, something she hadn't done since college. Connor had discovered some of her old short stories and essays and had encouraged her to start working on new pieces. She had been accepted into a local writer's workshop and had begun developing a collection of personal essays about relationships, family dynamics, and personal growth. The writing had helped Maya gain perspective on her experience with Derek and Amber, allowing her to explore her feelings about betrayal, forgiveness, and moving forward. Maya didn't want a relationship with Amber or Derek, but she also didn't want to be the kind of person who punished a child for their parents' mistakes. Maya had told her mother that she would be willing to have a relationship with her niece or nephew, but only if certain boundaries were respected. She would not attend family gatherings where Derek and Amber were present, she would not discuss her relationship with Connor or her wedding plans with Amber, she would not provide financial or emotional support to Derek and Amber, but she would be available to the child if needed as they grew older. These boundaries had been difficult for Maya's mother to accept initially, but she had eventually recognized that they were reasonable and necessary. Maya had been betrayed by two people she trusted, and she had every right to protect herself from further harm. The fact that she was willing to maintain any relationship with Amber's child was actually quite generous given the circumstances. Connor had been completely supportive of Maya's decision regarding her future niece or nephew. He understood that family relationships were complicated and that Maya needed to make choices that prioritized her own emotional well-being. He had also suggested that they might want to start a college fund for the child, not as a gift to Derek and Amber, but as an investment in an innocent person's future opportunities. The suggestion had been typical of Connor's thoughtful and generous nature. He consistently looked for ways to help people without expecting recognition or gratitude in return. He had donated anonymously to several charities that support children in.
She had realized that her anger about their affair had been less about losing Derek specifically and more about being deceived and disrespected by people she had trusted. The actual end of her relationship with Derek had been a relief rather than a loss. Maya had also gained insight into her family dynamics through her writing, recognizing patterns of behavior that had existed long before Derek and Amber's affair. Amber had always been the family member who received special treatment and had her mistakes minimized or excused. Maya had always been the responsible one who was expected to sacrifice her own needs for the sake of family harmony. The confrontation at Christmas dinner had been the first time Maya had refused to prioritize other people's comfort over her own well-being. The decision to end her engagement publicly rather than quietly had been empowering, demonstrating to herself and her family that she was capable of standing up for herself when necessary. Connor's family had been fascinated by the story of how he and Maya had gotten together, though they were too polite to ask for details about the circumstances. Maya had appreciated their discretion and their focus on the present rather than the past. James and Patricia had welcomed her warmly from the beginning, treating her as a daughter rather than as Connor's girlfriend who might or might not become a permanent part of the family. The relationship with Connor's family had been another revelation for Maya. Where her own family had always been somewhat chaotic and dramatic, Connor's family was stable and supportive without being boring or repressive. They had strong relationships with each other, but also maintained healthy boundaries and individual identities. Maya had particularly enjoyed getting to know Connor's sister Rachel, who was a year younger than Maya and worked as a nurse in Chicago. Rachel had a sharp sense of humor and a practical approach to life that reminded Maya of herself. They had quickly developed a friendship that extended beyond their connection through Connor, talking regularly and making plans for Rachel to visit Portland more frequently after the wedding. The contrast between Rachel's straightforward, loyal personality and Amber's manipulative, self-centered behavior had made Maya appreciate the difference between a sister who genuinely cared about family relationships and one who saw family members primarily as resources to be exploited when convenient. Maya had also been impressed by the way Connor's parents had handled the potentially awkward situation of their son becoming engaged to his best friend's ex-fiancé. They had never made Maya feel judged or uncomfortable about the circumstances, focusing instead on Connor's happiness and their confidence in his judgment. They had also been careful not to ask intrusive questions about Derek or to make comments that might make Maya feel defensive about her choices. The dinner with Connor's parents had gone beautifully, confirming Maya's sense that she was gaining a family that would actually support and appreciate her. James and Patricia had brought photos from Connor's childhood and had shared stories about his interests and achievements that revealed the depth of their love and pride in their son. Maya had also been touched by their obvious excitement about the wedding and their eagerness to help with any aspects of the planning that might benefit from their input or assistance. Patricia had offered to make Connor's favorite dessert for the reception, while James had volunteered to help with transportation logistics for the out-of-town guests. The evening had ended with James and Patricia expressing their gratitude to Maya for making Connor so happy and their excitement about officially welcoming her into the family. Maya had felt a warmth and acceptance that she had never experienced with Derek's parents, who had been kind but had always made her feel like she was auditioning for their approval. As Maya and Connor cleaned up after dinner, they talked about how smoothly the evening had gone and how much they were looking forward to the wedding. The conversation naturally turned to their plans for the honeymoon, which would be a hiking and photography trip through several national parks in Utah and Colorado. The honeymoon plans reflected their shared interests and their approach to their relationship, focused on experiences rather than material possessions, emphasizing adventure and discovery, and designed to strengthen their bond rather than simply provide relaxation or luxury. Maya had been amazed by how easy it had been to plan a honeymoon with Connor compared to the complicated negotiations she had endured with Derek about their previous honeymoon plans. Derek had wanted to go somewhere tropical and expensive, where they could stay at a resort and be waited on by staff. Maya had preferred something more active and adventurous, but she had eventually agreed to Derek's preferences to avoid conflict. With Connor, there had been no conflict to avoid. They both wanted to spend their honeymoon hiking, taking photographs, and exploring new places together. The trip would be relatively inexpensive but rich in experiences and memories. Maya was particularly excited about visiting Arches National Park, which she had wanted to see since college but had never had the opportunity to explore. The conversation about their honeymoon led naturally to discussions about their longer-term plans and goals. Connor was interested in eventually starting his own consulting firm, focused on sustainable energy solutions for small businesses and residential developments. Maya wanted to use her MBA to move into a leadership role in marketing or business development, possibly starting her own firm or joining a company that was working on projects that aligned with her values. They had also talked about their plans for starting a family, though they had agreed to wait at least 2 years to focus on their careers and their relationship. Both of them wanted children eventually, but they also wanted to ensure that they were financially and emotionally prepared to provide the kind of stable, supportive environment that children deserved. The contrast with her previous relationship had been striking to Maya. Derek had never wanted to discuss long-term plans beyond the wedding, seeming to assume that marriage would somehow automatically resolve any questions about their future compatibility. Connor, on the other hand, was eager to talk about their shared goals and to plan for the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. Maya had realized that one of the fundamental problems in her relationship with Derek was their different approaches to planning and decision-making. Derek had been reactive and avoidant, preferring to deal with problems only when they became unavoidable. Connor was proactive and strategic, preferring to anticipate challenges and develop plans for addressing them before they became serious problems. The difference had been evident in everything, from their approaches to household management, to their career planning, to their communication about relationship issues. Maya had found herself constantly frustrated by Derek's reluctance to engage in serious conversations about their future, while Connor seemed to thrive on the kind of deep, meaningful discussions that helped couples build strong foundations for lasting relationships. As Maya and Connor prepared for bed on the night of his parents' visit,
Maya found herself reflecting on how dramatically her life had changed in just a few months. The woman who had been settling for a mediocre relationship with Derek because it seemed safe and socially acceptable had been replaced by someone who was actively pursuing her dreams and building a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine compatibility. The transformation had both gradual and sudden, building slowly during the months when Maya had been unconsciously comparing Derek to Connor, then crystallizing rapidly during the crisis that had forced her to make definitive choices about her future. Maya had learned that she was capable of much more courage and decisiveness than she had previously believed. The woman who had spent years avoiding conflict and prioritizing other people's comfort over her own needs had found the strength to stand up for herself when it mattered most. She had also learned that she deserved the kind of love and partnership that Connor offered, the kind that made her feel valued and supported rather than taken for granted and minimized. The relationship with Connor had shown her what it felt like to be with someone who genuinely appreciated her intelligence, her humor, her ambitions, and her affection. As Maya fell asleep in Connor's arms on the night before they would begin the final countdown to their wedding, she felt grateful for the betrayal that had forced her to reevaluate her life and her relationships. Derek and Amber's affair had been painful and humiliating, but it had also been the catalyst for positive changes that might never have happened otherwise. Maya had gained a partner who truly loved her, a career that challenged and fulfilled her, creative outlets that brought her joy, and the confidence to pursue her goals without apologizing for her ambitions or settling for less than she deserved. The Christmas dinner that had begun as a celebration of family and tradition had ended up being the beginning of Maya's real life, the life she was meant to live with the person she was meant to love. 6 weeks from now, Maya would marry Connor in a ceremony that reflected their values and their vision for their future together. The story that had begun with betrayal and deception would end with love and commitment, proving that sometimes the most devastating setbacks could become the foundation for the most beautiful new beginnings. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.